Hello, everyone, and welcome to this continuation of the series on computer parts and building, as it's turned into. Please say hello to my once again napping cat. And I haven't made her a Patreon yet, but who knows, maybe I will. So, without further ado, let's get started on the RAM installation.
Your RAM is what's called DDR4, and I don't remember any of the speeds because, well, I guess they're on the back. There you go, champ. It's whatever, I got whatever was a reasonable price and also the fastest that your motherboard would support, basically. Because memory speed for some processors doesn't matter, for yours it does. You will see a little bit better performance in games and shit if you've got a little bit faster RAM. Though, nothing in here is going to set any world records, so it's not that big a deal. Alright, and I'm going to do this just for example, but there is something to keep in mind. There is optimization for which slots get the RAM, right? Because there's 4 slots and there's only 2 sticks of RAM, you know? Usually, and there's also, you can only plug it in one way, like basically everything else here. If you see, there's a little gap, right? If I zoom back out, that gap is closer to one edge than the other. That lines up with a ridge in the actual slot. So usually motherboards ask you to slot in alternating until all are full, starting with the closest slot. So in this case, it's...
As the note says, at least this time I was wrong. I don't know if I'm still right about my usually statement. Maybe I was wrong most of the time, but I was certainly wrong in this instance. And the note's cut off by the picture of my cat. Well, it's not a picture, it's a video of my cat, but it says not 1 and 3. They should be installed in slots 2 and 4, and I don't know if I mentioned that later in the video or just corrected off screen.
probably going to end up looking like this. And some motherboards, if you put things in the wrong spots, actually won't boot at all. Like, you'll just turn it on and it'll give you some sort of beep code error or LED light error. Which brings me to my next point. I have no idea what the LED errors are like on your motherboard. So if anything ever happens, you're gonna have to Google for it using the motherboard model, and you'll get all the boxes and everything, so you'll know what model's your board and all of that stuff. All right, so now I'm gonna get some boxes out of my...
If you have the space, that's one reason it can be convenient to save at least some of the boxes for parts. Another thing is, if you have to take it apart for transportation or you want to sell parts later, it can be convenient to sell them with the original box. I also tend to be a box hoarder though, so your mileage may vary in terms of how much that's worth to you.
way here, and the screws for the little motherboard bracket thing. I'll put a little Ziploc baggie in here, and the little black brackets are going to go in there. You'll get those too. But before I start actual assembly, I'm going to explain the headers here a little bit. So this one right here is the USB 3 to power the USB 3 ports, well, not power, to provide data to the USB 3 ports that I pointed out on your case earlier, right? The front panel header is always a bit of an adventure because it looks so different on every motherboard, and I don't see any clear labels, so I'm gonna have to look it up later. And who knows, maybe I'll feel motivated and edit just a little box in over whichever one it is. But
So you saw the note, it's apparently JFP1 right here. on the bottom right corner of the motherboard. This can be in a different location on every motherboard. Usually it's around the bottom row somewhere.
Then there's the, like I said earlier, that audio thing that kind of looks like a USB 2.0 header. And the audio is this one. Again, it has a label on it. And then you see like sys fans, right? So system fan for like your chassis could plug into that. This has apparently an RGB header on it. Maybe that's what that is. That doesn't. This is such a cheap motherboard. I'm actually kind of surprised. Obviously, it wasn't on the list of features I figured you needed. And that's going to be most of your headers, although scattered around the board, there's usually more fan headers, right? Because this obviously has a fan. This is a 4-pin fan header, and I won't bore you with what that means, but that will go in CPU fan. It doesn't have to. Like a fan is a fan. It doesn't actually matter where it goes. So you see, it only goes on one way because there's a key on this side, right? There's a little plastic piece that acts as a key that lines up with the little plastic piece right there. So then you just slide it on. So there's what, another system fan here, and then there's the one I already pointed out down here, and that might be all you get, which may inform my decision on how many fans I'm going to provide you. But this board overall is pretty cheap, and it's smaller than a normal one. A normal motherboard would look about the same, from edge to edge, but from top to bottom.
In a previous video, I mentioned that there were many form factors inside of the ATX standard, and this is one of them. This particular motherboard was micro ATX, meaning it was smaller than a regular ATX motherboard. And the ATX is kind of the standard size, but inside of the larger ATX standard, there are many sizes, micro ATX and well, extended ATX is another one, but that's not necessarily the name of the size, the name of the form factor in the standard. That's a bit more complicated, but for the most part, regular ATX and micro ATX cover a lot, and there are some smaller even than this one. There's mini ITX, and I don't know if mini ITX was really part of the ATX standard or it got rolled into it or what the deal was, but that's another fairly standard motherboard size.
Would be taller. It would come out to like down here somewhere. And that is basically just because this one was cheap. That's really all there is to it. And it allows us to fit it into a little bit smaller case. But you can see now that I have the cooler on, I just handle the motherboard by the cooler because it's an easy thing to hold on to. I know I won't drop that. Okay, is there anything else I want to do outside of the case? In your specific case, it doesn't appear, so the motherboard to be electrically isolated from the case.
Alright, I think before we go into that one, I am going to call it and we'll get shots of putting the motherboard in the case in the next video. And just so you guys know, if I'm not recording and building at the same time and explaining things at the same time, it really does not take very long to build a normal computer like the one in this video. It takes almost no time at all. Something like maybe a half hour going from a bunch of boxes to a built computer, and maybe another 20 minutes of debugging if I realize I plugged a cable in wrong or something. It's not a particularly difficult challenge, but it takes a while when you're trying to explain what's going on to help somebody else out, and it's taking even longer now because I'm only releasing one video per day. So I'll see you guys in the next one where hopefully we start actual assembly.